On the night of March 22, 1945, a company of American infantrymen sat in darkness on the western bank of the Rhine River near Oppenheim, Germany, loading gear into small assault boats. The air was cold, carrying the smell of river water and distant smoke. These soldiers had spent 8 months fighting their way from Normandy beaches to Germany's final natural fortress, and now they were about to cross it without the world knowing. No artillery preparation. No airborne drops. No cameras. Just men, boats, and the kind of audacity that separates footnotes from legends. Their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Irvin, had received orders just hours earlier from a general who'd been planning this moment since the previous September. The order was simple and dangerous. Cross the Rhine tonight. Build a bridgehead. Tell no one until it's done. If successful, they would beat Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's grand operation by a single day and prove that speed could accomplish what months of preparation promised. If they failed, the river would swallow them in silence. Above them, in a command post several miles back, General George S. Patton sat near a field telephone, smoking a cigar and waiting for confirmation that his most defiant gamble had succeeded. Patton did not look nervous. He looked like a man who'd been waiting for this moment since the last time someone told him no. To understand why Patton needed this crossing so desperately, you have to go back 7 months to the moment when victory seemed closest and was suddenly snatched away. August 31, 1944. Patton stood in a forward headquarters near Reims, France, studying a map where the border of Germany was marked in thick black ink. Outside, the engines of Third Army's armored columns ticked and cooled after weeks of relentless advance. The air inside smelled like every command post in war, cigarette smoke, damp canvas, and the metallic tang that comes from men who live too close to violence. Patton's Third Army had just done something most generals only imagined. In barely 3 weeks, they had torn across France in a blur of speed and violence that left German defenders scattered and demoralized. Town after town fell behind them like dominoes. Entire enemy units surrendered because the alternative was annihilation. And now, with momentum still surging, Patton's spearheads were positioned within striking distance of the Siegfried Line, which in late summer was more idea than fortress. The German border sat on his map like an open door. Then the telephone rang. Patton picked up, and the voice on the other end was General Omar Bradley, his friend, his superior, and in this moment, the man delivering a decision Patton would never forgive. Bradley's tone was careful, measured, the voice of a man reading a script he wished didn't exist. Orders from Eisenhower. Fuel allocation cut. Effective immediately. For a moment, Patton said nothing, as if silence could make the message disappear. Then the reality hit with the force of artillery. Fuel was not a convenience. Fuel was movement itself. Without fuel, Third Army was not a weapon. It was a sculpture garden of immobile steel. Patton could already see the consequences unfolding in his mind. Thousands of tanks sitting useless, crews idle, the offensive spirit draining away not from German bullets but from Allied bureaucracy. His staff watched him the way men watch a storm gathering on the horizon, recognizing the signs. Patton's anger did not simmer. It detonated. He had spent his entire career worshipping at the altar of momentum, believing with near religious certainty that speed could break an enemy's will faster than any artillery barrage. He had driven his army to exhaustion because he understood something that staff officers often forgot. A defeated enemy is most dangerous when you give him time to recover. And now, just when the Germans were staggering, just when their defenses were improvised and scattered, someone far from the front had decided to pause. To understand the scale of Patton's fury, you need to understand what Third Army had accomplished in the weeks before that phone call. On July 25, 1944, Operation Cobra finally shattered the German line in Normandy. For weeks after D-Day, Allied forces had been trapped in hedgerow country, where every field was a fortress and progress was measured in yards and blood. Then Cobra broke the stalemate. The line ruptured, and when Patton's Third Army became operational on August 1, it was like releasing a predator into open terrain. Patton did not advance. He hunted. His armored divisions surged forward at speeds that seemed impossible for an army bound by logistics and the friction of war. While other Allied units wrestled with organized resistance, Patton's columns were already racing across the breadth of France, turning German withdrawals into routes. His philosophy was brutal and clear. Keep going. Maintain pressure. Never let the enemy regroup. One of his commanders once asked how fast to push. Patton's answer became legend. Drive until the tanks run out of gas, then get out and walk. It was not a joke. It was doctrine. By late August, Patton's forces had reached the Moselle River. Beyond it lay the Lorraine Gap, a corridor pointing like an arrow toward the Saar industrial region, the engine of Germany's war production. German commanders later admitted how weak their defenses were in that moment. They were scrambling, improvising, trying to form coherent lines from shattered remnants. Patton's intelligence officers saw what he saw. The Siegfried Line was undermanned. German logistics were chaotic. This was the window, brief and irreplaceable, when relentless pressure might crash through before the enemy could even decide where to stand. Patton knew exactly what he needed. About 400,000 gallons of fuel per day to sustain his advance. Throughout August, he had been receiving roughly that amount. It was not generous, but Patton had never needed generous. He believed an aggressive commander could turn minimal resources into decisive results. Then in the final days of August, the fuel began to disappear. First in delays, then rationing, then what felt like strangulation. The decision was not made carelessly. On August 28, 1944, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower met with his planners at SHAEF headquarters facing a nightmare that had nothing to do with courage and everything to do with arithmetic. The Allied armies were advancing faster than their supply system could sustain. Most supplies still flowed through Normandy beaches and the port of Cherbourg. Antwerp had been captured but remained unusable. Supply lines stretched across hundreds of miles of damaged roads. There simply was not enough fuel, ammunition, and spare parts to keep every army advancing simultaneously. Someone had to be prioritized. Someone had to wait. Into that dilemma stepped Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery with a plan as bold as it was politically attractive. Montgomery argued for a single concentrated thrust through the Low Countries, across the Rhine, and into the Ruhr. Give him the resources, he insisted, and he could crack Germany's industrial core and end the war by Christmas. It was audacious. It promised clarity. One decisive punch instead of scattered jabs. Eisenhower listened, weighed the alliance politics, the pressure from London, the need to keep British leadership engaged, and Eisenhower shifted priority north. Patton felt the impact with brutal immediacy. On August 31, 1944, the roar of Third Army engines did not merely quiet. It stopped. Fuel that had sustained movement was reduced to a trickle. Patton's armored forces, which had rolled like thunder across France, now sat silent in muddy fields near the Moselle. Thousands of tanks, trucks, and half-tracks became monuments to inertia. Soldiers who had ridden the wave of liberation now found themselves idle, playing cards on tank hulls, watching weather shift toward autumn. On maps, the German border was still just days away. Without fuel, it might as well have been 300 miles. Patton's rage became almost elemental. He called Bradley again, and the conversation was less discussion than eruption. The enemy was vulnerable. The enemy was retreating. And here they were, stopping because of a theory about concentration that required sacrificing momentum everywhere else. Bradley, who understood Patton's frustration and shared much of it, could offer only what every commander hates hearing. Those were the orders. Fuel and priority were going north to Montgomery's 21st Army Group. Patton would have to wait. Waiting was not in Patton's nature. If war was movement, then waiting was death. He was a commander who believed initiative was not a luxury but the essence of victory itself. When official channels closed, he turned to unofficial ones. He called in his quartermaster, Colonel Walter Muller, and gave instructions not found in any manual. Find fuel. Use imagination. Make it happen. Muller understood exactly what that meant, and so did every logistics officer in Third Army. The result was a campaign within the campaign, a shadow war fought not against German panzers but against Allied supply bureaucracy. Third Army quartermasters did not merely request supplies. They intercepted them. They established traffic control points on key routes and redirected convoys. They arrived at depots with paperwork official enough to pass quick inspection. They loaded trucks fast and vanished before questions arose. If another unit's supplies sat unused while Germans remained alive, Patton's men believed those supplies were wasted. Patton's attitude was ruthless and straightforward. Supplies belonged to whoever could use them to kill Germans. Other commanders began complaining. First Army sent trucks to collect allocations only to discover depots mysteriously empty. Seventh Army tracked shipments that somehow ended up in Third Army possession. Protests grew louder, accusations sharper. Was it theft? Critics said yes. Patton called it aggressive logistics. In his mind, he was not stealing from allies. He was stealing time from the enemy, and time in war is the currency of survival itself. While Patton struggled, Montgomery's forces received priority on nearly everything. The resources were not just abundant. They were overwhelming. Montgomery's plan, Operation Market Garden, required massive concentration of assets. It would drop airborne forces deep behind German lines to seize bridges in the Netherlands while ground columns raced up a single highway to link with them. For this, Montgomery received vast allocations. Transport aircraft, gliders, fuel, ammunition, replacement vehicles, reinforcements. The kind of logistical attention Patton could only envy. Eisenhower's reasoning was strategic and political simultaneously. Market Garden, if successful, would create a bridgehead over the Rhine, outflank the Siegfried Line, and position Allies to slice into the Ruhr. It promised dramatic breakthrough and clean narrative. The decisive blow through the north. On September 17, 1944, Market Garden began. 35,000 airborne troops dropped behind German lines into Holland. The sky filled with parachutes and gliders, a spectacle that looked like victory in motion. For a brief moment, the plan seemed viable because bold plans always look brilliant at launch. Montgomery's ground forces pushed forward along a single narrow highway, an artery that had to keep beating or the operation would collapse. In the first days, airborne troops fought fiercely. Bridges were seized. Towns were held. The world watched and hoped. Then reality took the plan by the throat. British 1st Airborne Division at Arnhem encountered SS Panzer units that intelligence had dismissed or underestimated. Those armored formations were not broken ghosts. They were lethal, organized enough to encircle and crush. The single highway became a shooting gallery. Every vehicle moving north was exposed, funneled into narrow routes where German guns reached from both sides. A single destroyed truck could choke advance. A single ambush could delay an entire corps. American paratroopers fought desperately around Nijmegen. Polish brigades struggled to reinforce under heavy fire. Airborne forces at the far end, expected to hold until armor arrived, began realizing armor might never come. By September 25, 1944, Market Garden was over. The Arnhem bridgehead had to be evacuated under darkness, a retreat carried quietly because no one wanted to admit failure in daylight. Thousands of casualties, with British airborne paying a terrible price. The operation did not secure lasting bridgehead. It did not outflank the Siegfried Line. It did not end the war by Christmas. What it did was consume enormous resources during the moment Germans were weakest, resources that could have kept multiple Allied armies advancing, stretching German defenses to breaking. Patton watched this unfold with bitterness almost unbearable. While Market Garden burned through fuel and airlift and ammunition, his offensive remained pinned in Lorraine with minimal allocation. His engineers worked building bridges across the Moselle. Reconnaissance probed enemy positions. Infantry consolidated, endured. But the armored fist, the weapon that shattered Germany's hold on France, sat motionless because steel without gasoline is nothing but weight. Autumn rains came, turning roads to mud and fields to swamps. Germans, given time, did what Patton feared. They regrouped. They rebuilt. They poured units into defensive positions empty weeks earlier. Patton's diary captured frustration in words crude and true. His men could eat belts, he wrote, but tanks could not fight without gasoline. He lobbied Bradley constantly, presenting detailed plans showing how Third Army could resume advance with modest support. He argued the window was closing. He pointed to Market Garden's failure as proof concentrating resources in one northern gamble had been mistake. Bradley sympathized. He often shared Patton's doubts. But Eisenhower remained committed to broader alliance strategy. Even after Market Garden failed, strategic focus shifted north to clearing Antwerp approaches. Supply priority did not swing back to Patton with urgency he believed necessary. Every passing day felt like opportunity slipping away. Patton could almost see it, Germans pulling themselves together, building defenses, laying mines, organizing counterattacks. He could see weather worsening, days shortening, roads becoming impassable. Time itself turned against him. In late summer, speed had been weapon. By autumn, speed required supplies being rationed, diverted, delayed. And in war, delay is not neutral. Delay belongs to enemy. 3.5 months later, December 16, 1944, Germans launched their last major Western offensive, Battle of the Bulge. It smashed into American lines in Ardennes, catching many by surprise. Cold was vicious. Forests thick. Roads narrow. German armor pushed through gaps, aiming toward Antwerp, trying to split Allied armies and force political collapse. What followed became bloodiest battle American forces fought in European theater. Statistics heavy with grief. Tens of thousands of casualties, units overrun, towns surrounded, desperate defenses in snow and fog. But numbers do not capture what Patton understood immediately. Patton believed the Bulge was not merely German gamble. It was product of time Germans had been given. German generals later confirmed forces used for Ardennes offensive were assembled during months Allies slowed, when supplies were consumed by failed operations, when Third Army sat restrained. Divisions, ammunition, fuel reserves, everything Germany needed for that final punch had been gathered while Allied momentum stalled. If Third Army had smashed into Germany earlier, Patton argued, the Bulge would not have been possible. Enemy would have been too disorganized, too pressured, too busy surviving. Patton's reaction was bitter and prophetic. This, he said in essence, is what happens when you give a man enough gas to hold ground but not enough to take it. You let enemy recover. You let him choose time and place to hit you. In Patton's mind, the Bulge was bill coming due for caution, price of delay paid in blood. War dragged through winter into spring. By March 1945, Allied armies were closing on Rhine, Germany's last major natural defensive barrier in West. On March 7, 1945, First Army captured Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen intact, securing crucial crossing. That changed campaign. But Montgomery had been planning his own Grand Rhine crossing as set-piece operation for months. Operation Plunder was scheduled for late March, built around massive artillery preparations, airborne drops, and publicity that turned military movement into theater. Patton saw Plunder and felt old rage sharpen. For months, he had been held back, restrained, forced to scrape for supplies while Montgomery received spotlight and resources. Now Montgomery was preparing another grand performance on Rhine. Patton wanted vindication, not merely personal triumph but proof his philosophy had been right all along. Speed and initiative could accomplish what elaborate planning delayed. Then chance, Patton's favorite ally, offered opening. On March 22, 1945, Patton's reconnaissance units found lightly defended crossing point near Oppenheim, south of Mainz. It was not where Montgomery planned to cross. It was not part of grand scheme. It was simply weak spot, the kind appearing when enemy is stretched thin, still guessing where hammer falls. Patton did not ask permission. He did not wait for months of preparation. He did what he always believed commander should do. He seized moment. That night, March 22 into 23, 1945, elements of 5th Infantry Division crossed Rhine in assault boats. Crossing was not cinematic. It was dark, cold, dangerous, brutally simple. Soldiers paddled under threat of fire, landed on enemy soil, dug in before dawn. They built bridgehead not with speeches but shovels and discipline. By morning, foothold held. By midday, engineers were building bridge. Patton's army had done what he argued for since September. Strike fast before enemy responds, let momentum create security. Only after bridgehead secured did Patton make phone call mattering most. He called Bradley. Conversation was brief but carried months of frustration and sharp satisfaction of being proven right. Patton told him almost gleefully not to tell anyone yet, but Third Army was across. Bradley asked where, disbelief in voice. Across Rhine, Patton confirmed. Sneak division over in night. Across and expanding. Bradley's reply, part wonder, part resignation to Patton's unstoppable nature, was simple. Well, I'll be damned. You mean across Rhine? Patton confirmed again. Satisfaction was not just strategic. It was personal. First Army already crossed at Remagen, yes, but this was not about being first overall. This was about beating Montgomery. Proving Rhine could be crossed without months of planning, without circus of publicity, without allocation of nearly every resource. Patton said line revealing true motive. He wanted world to know Third Army made it before Monty. Next day, Montgomery's Operation Plunder began. March 23, 1945, one day after Patton's crossing. Contrast was almost cruel. Plunder was massive. Hundreds of thousands of men, thousands of artillery pieces, airborne drops, preparation making it feel like staged event rather than battlefield gamble. Churchill himself came to watch. Photographers documented everything. Press narratives ready. British public would see it as triumph of planning and power, greatest river crossing in history. Patton watched those newsreels with bitter satisfaction. He had crossed same river with assault boats and infantry courage in darkness without fanfare. No prime minister on riverbank. No polished speeches. Just men paddling into danger, building success from speed. Yet he knew cameras would linger on Montgomery's spectacle, not his own swift stroke. Insult, as Patton saw it, did not end with publicity. When Eisenhower toured crossings, he spent hours at Montgomery's site, praising operation for cameras, treating it as centerpiece of Rhine campaign. When he visited Patton's bridgehead, it was brief, almost afterthought. Patton had been right about mobile warfare, right about speed over preparation, right about value of relentless pursuit. History was proving it. But recognition went, as it often did in coalition war, to man with louder narrative. Once across Rhine and finally supplied matching his ambitions, Patton showed exactly what he had been trying to tell Eisenhower since early autumn. Third Army did not merely advance. It raced. Between late March and early April, it covered enormous distances at speeds shocking both allies and enemies. Patton's armor bypassed resistance, leaving infantry to clean behind. German units trying to establish new defensive lines discovered American tanks already in rear. It was blitzkrieg turned against nation that invented it. Towns fell, bridges seized, prisoners poured in. Third Army became moving storm. As front surged east, Patton's men liberated camps revealing darkest truth of Reich. They pushed into central Germany, into Czechoslovakia, always moving, always hunting. Patton's ambition reached further still, toward Berlin. In his mind, capital was not merely symbol. It was ultimate proof of doctrine. He believed he could have reached it if allowed, but politics intervened again. Agreements made at Yalta and strategic decisions about occupation zones meant Berlin would be taken by Soviets. Patton was ordered to halt, not because of German resistance but politics. His bitterness was immediate and sharp. He argued they could have been in Berlin months earlier if fuel had gone where it could have been used decisively instead of spent on failed northern gambles. He believed war could have ended before winter. He believed thousands of lives could have been saved. By spring, he was no longer speaking from frustrated prediction but demonstrated capability. Third Army, given resources, had proved what it could do. Behind all this, behind Patton's furious phone calls, aggressive logistics, daring Rhine crossing, was hard reality of coalition warfare. Eisenhower was not only commanding armies. He was managing nations. British prestige mattered. American political leadership mattered. Montgomery was not just Field Marshal. He was symbol of British military pride. Eisenhower could not treat him as merely another subordinate without risking alliance fractures. Churchill pressed Roosevelt. British leaders demanded prominent role. Eisenhower's decisions were shaped by need to keep alliance unified even when unity required compromises not militarily perfect. Eisenhower later acknowledged in essence national prestige was always present, always influencing decisions. In his view, war could not be won if alliance collapsed. Better to fight longer unified than win quickly and fracture politically. American leaders like George Marshall and officials in Washington often bristled at what they saw as resources serving British strategic preferences. Yet they understood Eisenhower's burden. Western alliance was weapon, and like any weapon, could be broken if mishandled. Still, debate over that late summer decision has never truly ended. Supporters of Montgomery argue Northern Thrust concept had logic, Market Garden failed because of execution and unforeseen resistance, not because idea was inherently flawed. Patton's advocates argue opposite, that stopping pursuit in September was one of European campaign's worst mistakes, that Germans were on collapse edge, and only Allied logistical hesitation gave them time to recover. German testimony after war gave weight to Patton's case. Senior German commanders described chaos of early September, defenses improvised, units shattered, resources scarce. They admitted moments existed when Allies could have crossed into Germany with far less resistance than later. They described how desperately German command tried constructing lines from almost nothing. For Patton, these admissions were grim vindication. He had seen weakness at time. He had argued for exploitation. He had been denied. Modern historians still debate counterfactuals. Could single army thrust into Germany been sustained logistically without exposing flanks? Would Patton have overextended, faced devastating counterattack? Some argue war might have ended months earlier with different supply allocations. Others caution logistics and German resilience might have prevented quick collapse regardless. But even skeptics generally acknowledge core truth Patton lived by. Momentum matters, and lost momentum is rarely regained without cost. Irony is Patton's aggressive logistics, behavior other commanders called theft, may have reflected deeper military reality. In mobile warfare, commander who seizes resources and maintains pressure often gains decisive advantage. War does not reward etiquette. It rewards speed. Patton's willingness to bend rules was not merely personality. It was expression of belief delay kills. Every day you let defeated enemy regroup is day he spends building defenses, calling reinforcements, preparing to inflict casualties when you finally resume advance. That is what makes story of Patton's fuel crisis more than tale about gasoline and trucks. It is case study in terrible price of caution. In late summer 1944, Patton believed road to Germany was open. He believed aggressive pursuit could end war sooner. He believed enemy was weakest when Allies chose to slow down. When supplies went north, when his tanks sat silent, he watched weakness harden into strength. He watched opportunity vanish into autumn mud. He watched Germans rebuild, then strike back in winter with fury of bulge. In March 1945, Patton finally got vindication in a way that could not be denied. He crossed Rhine with speed and audacity, beating Montgomery's grand operation by day, proving initiative could accomplish what pageantry merely celebrated. He then raced across Germany as if demonstrating day after day what might have been possible months earlier if Third Army had been fueled for exploitation instead of restraint. But vindication has cruel limit. Being right in spring could not undo blood spilled in winter. It could not bring back men lost in Ardennes. It could not reclaim months-stretching war longer than Patton believed necessary. For Patton, that may have been hardest burden, to know he had seen path to faster victory and feel it blocked by decisions shaped as much by politics as strategy. George Patton did not live long after war. He died December 1945 from injuries sustained in car accident, leaving legacy both brilliant and controversial. Yet central lesson of his fuel crisis endures because it is not only about one general's anger. It is about unforgiving mathematics of war. Momentum is not abstract concept. It is measured in fuel, supply lines, decisions made far from front. Speed can save lives, not by being reckless but by denying enemy time to recover. Delay is never free. It is paid later, often with blood. Patton understood enemy you allow to escape today is enemy you fight tomorrow, stronger, better prepared, ready to choose battlefield on his terms. In late August 1944, when Third Army engines went silent near Moselle, Patton believed Allies were not simply pausing. He believed they were giving right gift, time. And in war, time is one gift enemy always uses against you. That is why Patton raged at telephone call, why he pushed quartermasters into legend, why he sneaked across Rhine without permission, why he wanted world to know he beat Montgomery to that crossing. Because to Patton, all pointed to same truth. Caution can be deadlier than boldness. And cost of stopping when road is open is not measured in miles. It is measured in lives.